Welcome to Complaints on the Plate again. Welcome back. And I'm joined again by Matthew Alford. Hello, Matthew.
Hello, you make it sound like a chore.
Sometimes it feels like it is. So today we're talking about Have I Got News for You? But before we get into that, I just want to say, Matt, you are a comedian. And is there any way that people can go and see you perform?
Yeah, I mean, I'm often gigging around the Southwest. Maybe the best way, though, would be to just look at my TikTok, which is Matt Alford Comedy. Find me on TikTok, and that's where I do lots of little jokes. On my walks to gigs, I record jokes on the walks to gigs.
And just if you're like around the Southwest, just sort of wander into any performance gig area and ask, is Matt Alford playing tonight? And if you've got demand, when's Matt coming here? Book Matt. But you also got a documentary out.
Yeah, I've also done a documentary, or I've co-produced a documentary, which has been very much led by an academic from the United States called Roger Stahl. And that documentary is called Theatres of War. And our little group basically acquired a load of documentation from the Pentagon and CIA and FBI and others. And that documentation shows the extent to which the US national security state is able to manipulate Hollywood film scripts. And so we've made a documentary about that, which came out earlier this year and is available on Vimeo for, I think it's available on Vimeo for $5.
Well, I'll put a link
if you're a student in the United States, I think you can get it for free on something called Canopy.
Do you think that MI6 or MI5 even are involved in the production of Have I Got News for You?
No, I don't think there would be anything like that.
That's the end of this podcast then. Oh,
yeah.
So we're going to look at the latest aired episode of Have I Got News for You, which is from May of this year. Have I Got News for You, the show, has been running since 1990, and there's going to be another season. There's no sign of it ending. There's going to be another season later this year. Made me think of a quote from one of the Batman films, which is, you either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain. But then I thought, actually, maybe it was always a villain. I don't know. This is what I want to sort of talk about, because I did used to like it, but then maybe I was just an idiot.
I don't think it means you're an idiot if you like Have I Got News for You. I think that's a real stretch.
Well, I feel like it sort of pulled the wool over my eyes. Anyway.
In what way?
In what way? Okay, so this is my general idea about it, is that I thought when I used to watch it, particularly Ian Hislop, I never really liked Ian Hislop, but what I got from the whole show and what he was sort of bringing to it was politics is a bit fucked. They're all hypocritical, and the political system in the UK doesn't really work. And these people are sort of pointing out that and the way that works. And obviously starting in 1990 and going through the Blair years, that was that idea, right? This sort of neoliberal consensus that was not particularly popular, but because it was sort of agreed upon by both parties, it was very difficult to see anything else sort of arising out of that. So you were sort of in this frustrated period where low voter turnout, people weren't really interested in politics because it wasn't really functioning, and they were actually quite happy that people weren't interested because there wasn't anywhere else for them to go anyway. And so Have I Got News for You as like a sort of valve which everyone could sort of rally around to vent our frustration, I suppose. And then of course we had a few upheavals, Brexit, but most importantly for me anyway was Jeremy Corbyn becoming leader of the Labour Party. And when that happened, Have I Got News for You really just became part of the mainstream media. It wasn't critiquing, of course it was taking the piss out of Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party, and that's what you'd expect, but they weren't sort of critiquing how that was generally the position of everyone anyway, which was the sort of larger critique about the structural problems of British politics. They were basically on side with the right-wing media, I suppose, in that respect. and it's made me think that actually I was wrong all along, and they're more kind of what they really hate. They pretend that they hate this sort of political structure and they're taking the piss out of both sides, but what they really hate is anything else. That's much worse for them. So they like to sort of lightly rib at the Tories and Labour, but if there's any sort of external kind of critique of the whole process of British politics, that's much more ridiculed. But anyway, so on this episode, we have John Richardson's presenting, sort of classic. Then you've got Phil Wang, who's just, I don't know, would you know anything about Phil Wang? He's just like a sort of very bland comedian, right? And then Joan Bakewell is the only political person, the Labour peer. And her performance, or whatever, her contributions are unbelievable. One of the things she says, they're talking about Rishi Sunak on the rich list. And she comes out with,
well, he made the Sunday Times rich list. He came in at number 222. So everybody knows how rich he is. 780, is it billion or million?
Million, probably, I would imagine.
You think million is enough?
You're a Labour peer. You're in the House of Lords. You're passing legislation. You don't know how absurd it would be for Rishi Sunak to have 700 billion pounds. It's unbelievable. And then she makes a few other just really crazy kind of gaffes, right? And you think, here's a very powerful person in the country, a politician on a political satire show, surrounded by 4 comedians. It should be savage, right? It should be savage what's going on. She should be getting totally ridiculed, but everybody sort of politely ignores it. And I think, where's the kind of satirizing here? There's not really any satirizing. I was trying to sort of think, what are the jokes in Have I Got News For You? There's a few puns. There's obviously the classic Have I Got News For You reveal. There's not actually any sort of political satire going on.
I reckon maybe because Joan Bakewell is, I think, well into her 80s.
She's 89.
They may have 89. Yeah, they may have given her a bit of an easier ride because of that.
Well, I was going to say, I don't want to be ageist. I mean, it could be age, but I don't want to be ageist. So I'm just going to say she's an idiot.
You certainly should know the difference between a million and a billion. I mean, 800 billion
would make him by far the wealthiest person in the world. I think it's sort of 3 or 4 times as much as Elon Musk has. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I noticed that as well. And it made me think, really, it didn't make me think so much about the content of the show or the style of the show, because I thought maybe they were just being sort of, polite to her.
Well, that's the thing, they were, and the reason.
Yeah, you don't like that. What it did make.
Well, no, it's not that I don't. I mean, I don't like it. That's true, but it's because they, it's where do they focus their sort of ridicule and hatred. And Joan Bakewell,
how could what are they supposed to do? Ridicule a baroness who no one particularly knows, who's 89 years old. That would have made you happy, would it? If they're just savage this old lady because she made a mistake about
no. Well, let's go through the list of crimes first, and then okay. So what else does Joan Bakewell say? So later they're talking about the Platinum Jubilee and a number of towns are being given city status.
Oh yeah.
Richardson asks, what do you get now that you're a city, or what do they get now that they've become cities? And Bakewell says,
well, cathedral. You're meant to have a cathedral if you're a city.
I don't think you get a free one, though.
But the main one, and this is kind of where it kind of broke the crowd, Andy and Hislop, and there was a moment where they were sort of thinking, should we say something to Joan Bakewell, which was when they're talking about the Chelsea Flower Show, and Richardson asks, what was the big news at the Chelsea Flower Show? To which Bakewell says, bringing back beavers, reintroducing beavers into the countryside. And Ian Hislop, he does that. I don't know if there's a word for this, when you sort of gawp, but with a sort of half smile, because you're kind of shocked.
Yeah.
Isn't it the bringing back of beavers?
Yeah, no, that's really...
Isn't that the flower show?
And then she kind of like goes like this, like she sort of realizes that she's talking absolute nonsense. So I just thought, look, she decided to go on the show, right? And she goes on one of these shows to sort of represent Labour politics, right? That's what they all do. Boris Johnson famously became a sort of household name through Have I Got News for You? But these people, the whole point of the show is to sort of critique politics, but becomes very sort of cozy relationship. Yeah. And then, of course, when Corbyn was leader and you sort of look at the left wing of the Labour Party, they were sort of mercilessly, mocked, basically. So, yeah, it doesn't annoy me.
Well, I mean, I watched that video from a couple of years ago when she's talking about anti-Semitism in the Labour Party. And, I mean, it did make me think that Joan Bakewell's analytical and evaluative abilities are not very strong. I don't know quite the extent. I don't know quite how much that says about Have I Got News for You as a show.
But I mean, the problem is where we have an unelected House of Lords with quite a lot of people like that who are not the sharpest light bulbs, and also they're not really that engaged in politics. And Bakewell showed that quite clearly in the Channel 4 interview, which we can talk about later. Let's go on to the opening credits then. So I sort of went through this and made a list of what goes on in it. So it starts off with Russ Gas is charging Big Ben a lot of money for electricity. And that's obviously, biting satire there, having a go at Russia. Really, I was like, wow. I hadn't thought about Russia is bad, right? Great. And then the address on the bill, on the electricity bill, is Mrs. Have I Got News for You? Some street somewhere. It's like, this is great comedy content. What's interesting about that is because then there's like this sort of woman pops up behind it, and then it pans out to like a house where two old people, one of them being Mrs. Have I Got News for You. So you can see the perspective here is these two elderly people cowering in their home, while outside people are getting drunk in the street, sort of young people riding around in shopping carts and stuff. And you can see it's this really sort of centrist dad sort of bullshit position. I mean, the real joke is that the old people have a huge house that they live in with loads of extra bedrooms. It's a nice Edwardian house actually in the picture. And while the young people outside, well, of course they're partying outside. They don't have a living room or anything. So yeah, like there are sort of obvious positions that it's taking, and there is, a lot of other stuff that's going on that they're just not interested in satirizing or whatever, So the next thing it goes to is Greta sinking in the sea with a placard saying, "I told you so," which again is the sort of classic, the only, people whining about climate, they're just sort of trying to own people on Twitter. They don't really care about, it's just like, okay, so all the climate protests, that's just people, just want to be like sort of smugly in the right, it's a position, but it's one side. It's a very kind of basically center-right position.
Yeah.
Then of course we get to gun-crazed America. Again, this is biting satire. I thought this was like a British political satire show, and we've got sort of Russian gas, gun-crazed America, then Soviet soldiers hacking the election, then angry hipsters pulling down a statue of J.K. Rowling. Okay, Chinese hackers wearing Guy Fawkes masks who are revealed to be working with the Russians. It's like it's like a sort of Hillary Clinton.
I only watched it once, but I really was trying to find the funny in these opening.
Well, it's not. There's no jokes there. It's just sort of presenting
references to the world.
Yeah, and particular sort of crazy sort of liberal conspiracies, sort of Democratic Party, center-right kind of conspiracy theories about how things are working. Like basically everything bad is because of the Russians. Like there's no sort of critique of our actual political system and why that might be failing. And then so it's basically that and generational warfare, because it's sort of young people are angry, protesting idiots. We have to hide, but luckily we've got these massive houses, so it's okay. And then we've got, right at the end, you've got a little something, you've got Amazon and homeless people and boarded up shops. A little reference to the sort of actual reality of what's going on in Britain. But even one of those is like a hipster coffee shop that's been boarded up. So, you know, fuck the millennials, basically. Yeah, so that was it. And I was like, was it always like that? I think there used to be it was more kind of jokes about the British political class, right?
I don't know the extent to which it was better or more satirical back in the 90s.
Yeah, well, one way it might be that the sort of climate now is that people are more politicized and people are more engaged in politics.
Yeah,
you know, and that leads to good and bad outcomes. But obviously online things are very politicized. There's a lot of political content, comedy and stuff that is actually also comedy, but is
I guess so much is political now. But in the 90s, perhaps there was less politics. So Have I Got News for You was sort of like a more enjoyable and more hard hitting for that reason. Plus, as they're saying in some of the commentary that we read in advance of this, you know, you can get memes about politics and whatnot every day. And now What Have I Got News for You is always going to be behind the curve, even if just by 2 or 3 days, because everyone's coming out with satirical commentary on on political matters on a daily basis. So Have I Got News for You is just always going to seem a lot less cutting edge because of that. Plus, they're also they literally do cat videos on Have I Got News for You these days, as kind of, you know, there is even one on the show that we watched last night.
Was there?
Yeah, there was a little cat video at the start where he's doing the cat's doing a little bit of boxing. It was just a cute thing.
Okay, yeah.
Not very funny.
No, a lot of it was not very funny, I thought.
So for all of those reasons, but also the coziness that you're talking about, for all of those reasons, it's going to blunt the edges of what they're doing. With the most obvious example being Boris Johnson, of course, who appeared on there 6 times and helped to secure his reputation as a sort of, you know, kind of affable, sort of funny, slightly dotty uncle, and perhaps paved the way to him being prime minister in the sort of collective mind.
That's what I mean. Like, how can someone like that go on the show so many times and it sort of be in his favor to do so? You would think there's enough information out there. That's the thing. They don't really attack the guests. I don't mean you have to sort of personally, you know, attack Boris Johnson, but you can just, he's a public figure.
You only want them to attack the old Baroness.
Yeah. I want them to personally attack Joan Bakewell, but you know, not Boris Johnson, because I'm not a monster, you know. But I mean, you would think on a Have I Got News for You, if you decide to go on the show, then they're going to dig up a lot of stuff and throw it back in your face. And I've said this to you before we did this video, that I thought Never Mind the Buzzcocks back in its heyday with Simon Amstell, obviously not a political show, and they didn't have any politicians or anything like that on there. It was basically just goofy pop stars, normally ones that were kind of fading out of their sort of glory time and sort of trying to stay relevant by getting a TV slot. And in a way, it was kind of grim in that respect, because one of the few shows that would just have anyone on was Never Mind the Buzzcocks. So people that really couldn't get booked on things anymore would go on that to try and sort of boost their profile, knowing that once you go on that, Simon Amstell was going to absolutely destroy you. By doing the sort of basic research of just digging up things that you've said, positions that you've held, that kind of thing. And you thought on Have I Got News for You, they would do the same.
The Paris Hilton work was a low point for me. It wasn't what I wanted to be doing. And on top of that, it caused me some real problems with my hair. The photo shoot was for the Daily Mail, which made me feel really posh and upmarket.
Oh, you boring me. I'll see you later. I can't do
What?
it. Sorry.
Oh, no, Preston, come on.
I'm seriously going home.
Preston, we're having fun.
All right.
I mean, I only read his girlfriend's book.
That's his wife.
I only read his wife's book.
What's wrong with that?
I can't believe that upset him. I mean...
Yeah, I agree with you. The attitude of Buzzcocks was much more hostile and freewheeling, and for that reason, a lot better, I think, both in terms of at least the potential to make something more pointed and unexpected and fun in that regard. But also politically, if I Got News for You adopted that style, it could be a lot more hard hitting. I mean, you may remember in the 90s, one of the famous things that they did was when Roy Hattersley didn't turn up, they replaced him with a tub of lard. Do you remember that?
No, but
you're not aware of that one. That's like a really famous case of what Have I Got News for You did. Must have been about 95, something like that. And so the Roy Hattersley, big fat politician, big spluttery face, his spitting image puppet was always very funny. And I'm not quite sure why he didn't turn up. I guess he either had contempt for the show or was scared off. I'm not sure which. But they said, okay, well, instead of like having someone come in at the last minute, we'll just get a tub of lard and stick it there in his place. And so they kept on going back to the tub of lard as a way of, like, what's the answer to the question? So it was incredibly savage. I'd say it's very hard. They've done 61 seasons of All News. It's very hard to sustain that kind of level of energy.
Scrap the show then.
Yeah, but that's ultimately what TV and radio is, isn't it? Like mainstream productions are really just ways of making people feel okay because they're light entertainment. You're confusing it because you want it to be satire because they branded it as satire, but it's not. It's light entertainment.
I don't feel okay watching it. Yeah. It doesn't work.
Yeah. It doesn't feel like light entertainment.
Okay,
it feels like heavy persecution.
Because, like I said earlier, they were cutting when it came to the Labour Party under Jeremy Corbyn, and they do have a political position. This is what I find really interesting.
Yeah, I find that interesting as well. And in fact, one of your videos has done that. Complaints on the Plate videos has done that really well. They do have a political position. Of course they do. They're centrists. But that's also the case for the producers and the stars of the Now Show on Radio 4. It's also the position of, I'm sorry, I haven't a clue, the same kind of people who are running it. It's also the position of the editors of Private Eye and always has been. That's why they're interested in corruption, because they're not very interested. In fact, they're quite pointedly disinterested in attacks that are outside outside of that little bubble, just as you said. They're not going to question the narrative on Russia. They're not going to question the narrative on China. They're not going to question the narrative on big things like nuclear weapons or progressive taxing and all these different issues. They'll never question those because that's not what they're about. It's not what Ian Hislop's about as an individual. He seems like to the extent that he's a nice person, he's someone who wants people to behave properly, but in that kind of old preparatory school sort of, let's bloody well do the right thing, but without any appreciation of the broader context of what's happening in the wider world. Well, maybe that's unfair to say without any appreciation, but he'll treat something that a Corbyn acolyte has done, a Corbyn supporter or whatever has done wrong, or someone in the Labour Party, he'll treat that corruption the same as some really horrendous corruption. He'll just sees everything as just like, well, I don't like that and I don't like that because that's corrupt. And then quite beyond that, he's not looking at these issues which are so much bigger anyway, like climate change, that are so much more important. And what fossil fuel companies and all that do. But it all just becomes part of just one sort of light entertainment mix. It's just another reference that can be thrown into a show so that people who are making coffee and hanging out and having a nice time listening to the BBC can think, oh yeah, I know what that is. That's climate change. That is. Oh, there's that thing about climate change. Oh yeah, there's nuclear. Oh yeah, Putin said about he was going to use nuclear weapons. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, I suppose. My issue
corrupt, aren't they? So that's basically what it is. It's just chucking in those That's why like satire is never going to be very, very good if it is coming from the mainstream. The only way you can enjoy that sort of thing is just to switch off your brain or dull your brain and enjoy it for what it actually is, which is like entertainment. But you know, if you want to do that, then fine. But obviously there are better satirical shows and content out there, mainly being made online, no doubt. But I'm not quite sure what they are. I'm thinking back to the 90s when it was all Chris Morris and Brass Eye and the Day to Day and all that.
Where's Chris Morris?
I think Chris Morris just does very long-term projects. Like he took about 5 years to do that terrorism project.
3 Lions or 4 Lions or whatever.
Yeah, I think you're expecting a lot from Have I Got News for You?
Well, I didn't say I was expecting it. I'm just saying this.
You're hoping for a lot.
This is where it's at fault. But I think maybe a thought that came to me as you were saying that is, so what maybe the issue is that in the 90s or whenever, it was quite a fringe position to be outside of this sort of agreed political territory.
Yeah.
And that has now shifted quite considerably in the populace, and it's being sort of represented in strange ways through maybe Brexit or Corbyn or whatever, but it's not being represented in mainstream comedy or in political satire like Have I Got News for You. So Have I Got News for You is not sort of moved to where people are.
Yes.
A lot of people. And obviously the political situation has changed, and Have I Got News for You just doesn't reflect that at all.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think it's really, really good point. Yeah.
So let's talk about what's actually in this episode that we watched. So they spend the first half talking about Partygate, because this is back in May. And then this is great. So for balance, jokingly, John Richardson says, you know, this is the BBC, we've been attacking the Tories.
I guess since we're obliged for balance, let's have a look at a woman in Burnley telling us what she thinks about Keir Starmer.
I'm not keen. I just think he's very bland. I don't think he's got the thrust to be successful.
Want to comment on Keir's thrust before we move on?
And so the balance of the show is, we'll do a little bit of a critique of Keir Starmer. But the joke isn't that. The joke is, here's a stupid woman from Burnley, basically. That's from what I could see is the joke. And she was asked on the street in a Vox Pop thing, like, what's your opinion of Keir Starmer? And she can't articulate it as well as like a journalist can. So it's like, isn't that funny? Someone from Burnley can't articulate exactly what her problems with Keir Starmer are on the spot. It's like, oh, great. So what's the actual joke about Keir Starmer? Nothing. And
that is systematic as well. That's not just that's a repeated pattern, isn't it? On Have I Got News for You? It's not, and on many of those panel shows that I think you've shown really, really well. It's not just a one-off joke. I don't mind I don't mind one-off jokes that fall flat. I've done plenty of them myself, but it seems to be a pattern to sort of disparage northern voices and make a little gag out of it.
I mean, when you've got nothing else, you know, that's just.
But when you've got nothing else, slag off northern towns, isn't it? It's,
northern towns. That's the best punchline in the UK. Any northern town. But so I went back and I was trying to find, let's find some actual critique of Starmer. So I was looking up on YouTube. I was looking up Have I Got News for You, Starmer, liar. And I was just trying to find like I couldn't find any clips, but the only clip I found was from when he initially became leader. So what's that, like March, April, maybe May 2020. And there was an episode of I Got News for You that week. And they're talking about, so Starmer's won the leadership election. And there's quite a long segment about that. There was no joke about Starmer. There was a joke about his new shadow cabinet and the fact that he chucked out the Corbynites, and then they showed some footage of some of those MPs saying, you know, silly things.
Yes, notable departures include Richard Bergen, who last year gave us so many wonderful moments, like this one.
Polls say you won't win.
Pardon?
The polls say you won't win.
The polls said we wouldn't win last time.
You didn't.
But
there was obviously some anti-Semitism jokes, always classic.
The Sun in particular was delighted to see Ed Miliband return to frontline politics. What pun headline did they welcome his appointment with? Look who's back, Bacon.
Ooh.
Strictly speaking, is that a pun?
It's not really a pun, is it? It's more a collection of words that don't really belong together.
And you have to remember a photograph of him eating bacon.
They did print that snap next to the headline. Here it is. Yeah. Unable to eat a bacon sandwich. The last time the Labour leader was in step with the Jewish community.
But there was no joke about the actual new leader of the Labour Party, Keir Starmer. And it's interesting. That's when you see, like, they're not really sort of, oh, we'll just attack anybody. They are very sort of focused on which parts of sort of established political class are worth mocking and like properly mocking. And that's the thing. They can be quite devastating sometimes, quite savage, but not with Joan Bakewell, unfortunately.
Yeah. I think that's the impression I get with the editorial approach and with Hislop's approach, is that it's they will mock anything. They will have something to say satirically or whatever it is about everything. It's just that I'm trying to think of the right word for this, but it's like everything is the same thing.
No, this is not what I'm saying. Some things are much worse.
I think that some things are much worse in the real world.
They think that basically the Labour Party under Jeremy Corbyn was much worse than anything else.
Yeah, well, in that case, they really did have that's because Jeremy was outside of the mainstream bubble, wasn't he? So yeah, I was a huge supporter of Jeremy, and I mean, it was gut wrenching really to see Have I Got News for You do that, and of course every other. And
that's what I mean. Like, if Have I Got News for You was really we're just here to sort of take the piss out of everything, then you would think, okay, then one of the big kind of stories that you might want to take the piss out of, on top of taking the piss out of Corbyn, but on top of that, why not take the piss out of this narrative that everybody's taking the piss out of Corbyn? You know, it's like you want to sort of attack everything that's going on. Matt's gone inside because he kept breaking up.
Yeah.
But I think we've talked about Hislop. Merton is interesting because he's always been like, the idea of Paul Merton is that he doesn't say very much, but then when he does speak, he's sort of very funny, and he just does a few sort of great contributions throughout any episode, even back in the day, I feel. But I do think he's got less and less. He just seems very less and less involved, and he just seems very bored.
Yeah, but I think perhaps just maybe people like that don't care that much. Like Paul Merton is inherently an improviser and a comedian, so his sort of political take probably doesn't mean a great deal to him. So yeah, I think that's just kind of where you end up with these sort of shows. They just that's just all they are. Can there be something sort of better than that? Yeah, of course there can be. Should they be better? Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, well, my dream, I think I mentioned it to you before, is to have YouTube's first panel show, because the panel show in and of itself is quite a sort of British institution, and it can be quite good, and it's quite flexible format, and you can do all sorts with it. And I thought if you did something on YouTube, obviously you'd have the freedom to sort of take it where you wanted it to go. As you mentioned earlier, so we were going to talk about Mock the Week. That's died, right? It's gone. I mean, I never watched it, so I didn't even
Well, it hasn't entirely gone. Its final run is coming up, I think, in this autumn.
Oh, great.
Autumn 2022. And I think it sounds like a weird number of episodes. It's only like 6 episodes or something like that.
Oh no. Oh well.
So, but yeah, I mean that Mock the Week is another one of these panel shows of, does it do the right thing in terms of the way it approaches the news and satirizes the British society? I don't know.
I just don't think it does satirize anything really. So we mentioned earlier this Joan Bakewell interview, which was on Channel 4 in 2019, and it's not the reason that I hate Joan Bakewell, but it is a big contribution towards it, because I think there were a lot of very, very good sort of Labour interviews about Jeremy Corbyn, but this particular one is it's gold standard, one of the best interviews I've ever seen, with one of the like Labour right wingers just talking absolute nonsense. And yeah, if you, I'm going to put a link to it. It's on the Channel 4 website. Everything that she says is just absolutely fantastic stuff. So basically what happened was a bunch of lords bought an advert in the Guardian front page saying that Jews weren't welcome in the Labour Party. And then they got Joan Bakewell on Channel 4 to talk about this because she was one of the people that signed it. And she just basically has no idea about what's going on in the Labour Party and just says, some friends told me that things were bad. And it's like, do you not read the newspapers? You don't know what the actual narrative is supposed to be. And then she has to sort of end up trying to defend a position that she doesn't know anything about, which is, it's hard enough to defend that position when you are very much involved in it, because obviously it was a kind of ridiculous position that they were taking, but she doesn't know anything. So it's really good. So Christian Guru Murphy is interviewing her. And so he just asks quite sort of soft questions to sort of get her to sort of talk about the issue. She's like...
Initially, one or two Jewish friends started saying to me, what's all this about anti-Semitism in the Labour Party? And I said, I don't really know. Perhaps it's a little bit of local difficulty. They'll sort it out. And then I had friends who were saying, we're resigning from the Labour Party, and had other friends saying, it's insupportable, And then they started to say, what are you doing about it? What's the Lord's doing about it? And I thought, it's really time to get stuck in here and find out what's happening. And as I uncovered the story, I was appalled.
But why are you laying the blame so firmly at Jeremy Corbyn's door? I mean, he has acknowledged the problem. He said he's totally opposed to anti-Semitism. He's boosted the numbers of people working in the Labour Party trying to tackle this. Why has he failed?
Because he hasn't done enough. He's done a number of things. They've not been effective. He put up the numbers investigating. It hasn't been effective. So he needs to show more leadership. We want leadership. We want to have the sense that the leader of the Labour Party condemns this in the face of the public. He makes an absolute statement about it so that everyone can hear loud and clear that the Labour Party is a place that welcomes Jews, that has a fine tradition of having Jewish members. So we need a statement and leadership much stronger than we've seen so far.
So, what can Corbyn do more? And she says, show more leadership. She has no real response to that. And then it's like, yeah, okay, and what else? Condemn it, like really condemn it, like absolutely. It's, okay, what do you think has been going on for the last few years? She didn't even know that there was anything going on, which is, it's probably the most reported thing of the last few years in the news.
This ad says Labour is no longer a safe place for all members and supporters. Are you saying Labour is not a safe place for Jews?
Well, that's what they tell me. I'm listening to friends, I'm listening to contacts, I'm listening to Jewish people who say this to me.
That's what they tell me. She doesn't have any, she's a Labour peer.
Yeah. When we have someone like Maureen Lipman writing an article saying, I'm a lifelong Labour supporter and I'm not anymore. We need to listen when intelligent people say these things.
So when intelligent people like Maureen Lipman resign, something's up. Of course, Maureen Lipman famously resigned in 2015 or earlier during Miliband's leadership because she hated Miliband. I don't know when she rejoined, but presumably before Corbyn was leader. Maybe she joined to vote in that election, but she was back in 2015 and then resigned again under Corbyn. I don't know. I guess Bakewell didn't know that, but
It's a common thing, isn't it, that people seem to do, and I think they think that they're doing the right thing with Joan there, but and also Owen Jones did it about the anti-Semitism thing as well, where he sort of said, well, some of my friends seem really upset. And it's like, that's not good enough. Some of your a handful of your anonymous mates have some feelings.
Yeah,
does not a political position make. But a lot of people do that. It seems like a natural thing to do. I think it's people who really, I suspect in Joan's case, she's just this nice old lady who really wants to do the right thing, but she ends up getting dragged into these political debates that she doesn't really seem to understand, that there are other people, other political and economic interests involved in that, and she's a pawn within it. I mean, yeah. Anyway, I can't keep thinking about what happened to poor old Jeremy. I can't do it. I need a break.
Oh,
it was bad enough.
You've come to the wrong place.
I know. I'm still PTSDing the hell out of 2019.
Let's wrap it up there. We can always come back and do a whole show about Joan Bakewell, and maybe a whole series. Okay. Anyway, before we go, can I just say, oh yeah, like the video if you like the video, and please leave a comment. And also, Matt, what was the name of your documentary again?
Watch Theatres of War and join in however you can to save Julian Assange, the founder of WikiLeaks. That's what I always like to say at the end of these shows.
Yeah. That's good. We've got a video coming out about Julian Assange in a few weeks, actually, on this channel. Thank you very much, Matt. This is how we say goodbye on this. We do this, so you have to do it. Yeah, well done.
I like it.